Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are going to pop the hood on your body to see what really happens when you have a drink. We're breaking down the science of how you process alcohol, and trust me, it's fascinating.
So let's just jump right into it with a question I'm sure we've all asked. You're out with friends and one person is feeling it after half a beer, while you're perfectly fine. Why is that? And look, it's not just about tolerance or how much you weigh, though yeah, those things matter. The real kind of mind-blowing answer is written in your genetic code.
To really get a handle on this, we're going to imagine that your body, mainly your liver, is this amazing, highly specialized detox factory. Its one big job: to take the alcohol you drink and safely, carefully take it apart piece by piece. So come on, let's take a tour.
All right, our first stop on the tour is the main factory floor. This is where all the action happens. We're going to meet the key workers and see the whole assembly line in motion.
So, what's the raw material that shows up at the factory door? It's ethanol. And because this little molecule is soluble in both water and fat, it's like it has an all-access pass. It doesn't need a special key or anything. It just waltzes right through your cell membranes, especially into your liver, which gets the first crack at pretty much everything you consume. So the factory's main assembly line, it's basically a two-step deal. First, an enzyme worker called ADH grabs that ethanol and starts breaking it down. But, and this is a huge but, that first step creates something way worse, a super toxic compound called acetaldehyde. This stuff is the real bad guy in our whole story. The factory's #1 priority becomes getting rid of it, like immediately. So a second worker, an enzyme called ALDH, swoops in to convert it into harmless acetate, which is pretty much just vinegar.
You see, pretty much everything comes down to this one molecule, acetaldehyde. When it starts to build up, even for a little while, that's what's causing that facial flushing, the nausea, that racing heart, and long-term, it's a known carcinogen that can actually damage your DNA. The whole system is designed to keep the levels of this toxin as low as humanly possible.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The speed of that cleanup crew, it is not the same for everybody. And the reason for that difference is all in your genes. Think of your DNA as the literal blueprints for building those enzyme workers ADH and ALDH. Your genes have the exact instructions. And just like real blueprints can have tiny little variations, so can your genes. And these tiny differences can totally change the speed and the efficiency of your personal detox factory.
And this is where you can really see how that plays out. Most people have what we'll call the typical ALDH worker. It's fast, it's efficient, it gets the job done. But there's a really common genetic variation, known as ALDH2-2, that builds a worker that is, well, it's incredibly slow, almost inactive. So for people with this version, that toxic acetaldehyde just piles up, almost instantly, causing a really severe, unpleasant physical reaction. And we're not talking about some rare, obscure thing here. This specific inactive version of the gene is found in about half of all people of Chinese, Japanese, and Korean descent. The physical reaction is so awful that this single genetic quirk provides one of the strongest known protections against developing alcohol dependence. I mean, it's pretty hard to enjoy drinking when your body is screaming at you to stop. Okay, so genetics are a huge piece of the puzzle, but they're not the whole story. What happens if someone doesn't have that genetic protection and they just chronically overload that main assembly line with heavy drinking? Well, the factory has a backup plan, but it's a messy one.
I want you to think of it like calling in a freelance overtime crew because the main staff is just completely swamped. This backup system is called the microsomal ethanol oxidizing system, or MEOS for short. It's definitely not your body's preferred way to do things, but it gets triggered during chronic, heavy drinking.
Here's the catch, though. There is a serious trade-off. That main ADH pathway is clean, it's efficient. The MEOS pathway, on the other hand, well, it gets the job done, but it makes a huge mess. It creates a ton of collateral damage in the form of these highly destructive molecules called reactive oxygen species. You might know them as free radicals. And these things cause all sorts of stress and damage to your cells.
And this is where all that biochemistry suddenly becomes super important in a real-world way. You've probably heard a million times not to mix alcohol and Tylenol, right? Well, the reason why is a perfect and frankly scary example of this backup MEOS system in action.
Okay, check this out. Chronic drinking basically puts your MEOS system on steroids, massively ramping up production of its main enzyme, CYP2E1. Now here's the problem.
That supercharged enzyme is the exact same one that your body uses to process Tylenol. And it doesn't just process it, it converts Tylenol into another highly toxic compound called NAPQ. Normally, your liver can handle a little bit of NAPQ, no problem. But when the MEO system is in overdrive, it just churns out way too much of it, completely overwhelming your liver's defenses. And that can lead to catastrophic liver cell death.
All right, so we've toured the main factory floor, we've seen how genetics can change the workers, and we've met the messy overtime crew. Now let's zoom out and connect the dots. Let's see how all these tiny microscopic processes lead to the major health issues we all associate with chronic drinking.
And what's just wild is how all this big picture long-term damage, it all traces right back to those tiny processes we've been talking about. For example, that main pathway completely throws off your liver's energy balance, so it stops burning fat and starts storing it instead. Boom, fatty liver disease. Meanwhile, those toxic byproducts we talked about, acetaldehyde and those free radicals from the messy overtime crew, they're out there damaging your DNA, which jacks up your risk for several types of cancer. It all connects right back to what's happening on that factory floor. And it really brings us to the final takeaway here. Look, you can't change the genetic blueprints for your personal detox factory. Those are set. But understanding how your specific factory works, knowing its speed, its potential weak spots, and the dangerous byproducts it can create, that knowledge gives you the power to make smarter, more informed choices. Knowing the science isn't just trivia, it's a fundamental part of understanding your own health.